Call the February 18th, 2020 regular meeting of council to order. The invocation this evening will be given by Councilman Marn.
Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for the business at hand and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Donovan?
Here.
Mrs. Dowling?
Here.
Mr. Kirchner?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Landig?
Here. Council, you have the minutes of the regular meeting of February 4th, 2020. Move to approve.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. Public hearings. We have one public hearing this evening. I now call the public hearing for ordinance number 20-017 to order. This public hearing is being held pursuant to notice published and posted according to law. Julie, please read the title.
An ordinance amending Section 1127.01 of the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended by adding definitions for mixed-use development and planned development and enacting a new Section 113710 to define economically distressed commercial and industrial property and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as this caption generally is pretty self-explanatory, but when we adopted and council adopted the new PUD requirements, we did fail to include a couple of important definitions, those being mixed-use development and planned development. And then, of course, with the changes to the charter language that were adopted by the residents, with respect to the rezoning authority with council now has with respect to economically distressed properties. We wanted to more cleanly clarify that. So I will ask Ms. Mitchell to offer any thoughts on that.
Basically, as Mr. Filipiak indicated, we have created definitions for mixed-use development and planned development. The planned development regulation definition was actually previously created at the time of the planned development overlay district regulations were adopted. The economically distressed property is in direct response to the charter amendment that was created and made under Article 3, Section 3.09B, and which indicates that Division A shall not apply to legislation approving a rezoning of commercial or industrially zoned land which I is economically distressed as defined by the Mentor Code of Ordinances, and 2, that will be redeveloped as part of the approved rezoning for a mixed-use development. So these definitions will respond to that, those two specific terms that are listed here in the new charter. And then planned development, again, is just a reiteration of what was originally proposed at the time of the planned development regulation adoption back in July.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor?
We have one.
Please state your name and address.
Hi, George Davis. My business is at 9124 Tyler Boulevard, Mentor, Ohio. I don't know if it's necessary to speak in favor. I'm only here just in case there's some against, but I, for one, as a developer and contractor in the city, am excited about the mixed use and how the definition of economic distress is being defined. And I would just urge council to pass that, and hopefully there's nothing needed here because hopefully there's nobody against. But very excited.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience speaking in favor of this item? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this item? Hearing none. This public hearing is closed. Council is in receipt of all correspondence and emails pertaining to this matter. Before we go into new legislation, I just have a sad announcement. A prior council person passed away recently, and I'd like council to rise for a moment of silence for Carolyn Busey. Thank you. Please be seated. New legislation, ordinance number 20-017.
An ordinance amending Section 1127.01 of the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended by adding definitions for mixed-use development and planned development and enacting new Section 1137.10 to define economically distressed commercial and industrial property and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think we have anything substantive to add. We've tried to make the definitions as easy to understand and to put into practice as possible. With respect to the economically distressed provision here, again, ultimately, it's general enough for council to have the kind of discretion that I think you need to have on these, and we would urge adoption.
Council, what is your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. Ordinance number 20-017 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-018.
An ordinance to authorize transfers of funds, advances of funds, and revisions to appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Malinowski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Members of council, this ordinance firstly authorizes the approval of 2 permanent cash transfers. I am happy to say this formally, officially closes out one of the longest-standing capital project funds in the history of the city, Plaza Boulevard Extension. The good news is there's a surplus of $468,000 roughly, which goes back into our GO bond retirement fund. This also officially closes out the US 20 widening capital project fund utilizing TIF funds. Secondly, there are 3 temporary cash advances that are necessary from our general fund to kickstart 3 projects, including the largest being a $600,000 FEMA grant for the purchase of a vehicle. And then finally, several appropriation revisions, mostly necessary for the aforementioned legislation. I would recommend approval of the entire ordinance. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. I will note that Councilperson Busey led the charge in some of the Plaza Boulevard promoting and funding, and she is very pleased to know that there were $460,000+ returned to the general fund. Ordinance number 20-018 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-019.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to TC Construction Company, Inc. for the sidewalk repair/pedestrian safety program zones 1B and 1C and concrete repairs at Menor Lagoons Marina and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Swigert, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. 4 bids were opened on Friday, February 7th, 2020, for the sidewalk repair and pedestrian safety program, Zones 1B and 1C improvement project. The bids received for the project range from a low bid of $388,287.75 to a high bid of $474,680.53. Each bid contained an alternate bid of approximately $30,000 to $35,000 for concrete repairs at the Mena Marina in front of the rack storage building. The engineer's opinion of probable construction cost was $370,000 for the sidewalk repairs and $30,000 for concrete repairs at the Mena Marina, for a total construction cost of $400,000. The low bid was received from TC Construction Company Incorporated of Willoughby Hills, Ohio, whose bid was found to be in conformance with all contract requirements. Therefore recommended that the contract be awarded to TC Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $388,287.75 for both the sidewalk repairs and for the concrete repairs at Mena Marina. It's anticipated that the work will begin May 20th, approximately May 20th, May 2020, with project completion specified for August 14th of 2020.
Move to suspend.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake? Yes. Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. Ordinance number 20-019 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-020.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to perform all actions necessary to accept Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council 2019 Energized Community Grants Funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the city is eligible and will be receiving $153,848 from NOPEC, which is the group energy aggregator that the city participates in for energy upgrades. We've taken advantage of this in past years, including last year. And I would ask Mr. Schweiker to just give you some idea of how we've been spending that money.
Thank you. Some of the past projects we've implemented have been the upcoming project to replace windows at the police department. We've installed LED lighting, both interior and exterior at the senior center, LED lighting at all of our parking lots, and some HVAC equipment at our maintenance facility. And what we're looking at upcoming is the replacement of boilers at 2 of our pools, as well as LED light conversions at our maintenance facility.
So not only do we get the grant, but then we save on electricity and future bills. Good deal. Council, what is your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. Ordinance number 20-020 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-021.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to Farnham Equipment Company for the purchase and installation of replacement bleachers at the ice arena and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. As council is aware, we have been reinvesting in our ice arena quite a bit in the last 5 or 6, 7 years, and including lights and dasher boards and some of the HVAC equipment, chillers. And this is another one of those reinvestment projects at the West Arena. Mr. Kaminsky.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak, members of council. 2 bid proposals were received on January 31st, 2020 for the purchase and installation of new bleachers at the arena. The installation includes the non-elevated angle frame bleachers on the first level and the replacement of the telescopic and fixed seating on the upper level. Based upon review by the Mentor Parks and Recreation Department of the specifications and experience, Farnham Equipment Company based in Columbus, Ohio, was found to be the best bid for the purchase and the installation of the new bleachers. It is therefore recommended that a contract be awarded to Farnham Equipment Company based in Columbus in the amount of $230,500. Thank you.
Mr. President, just one quick, what will this bring our capacity to for seating?
Just shy of 700.
Thank you. Move to suspend.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan? Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger? Mr. Landig?
Yes. Ordinance number 20-0-021 has been approved. Resolution 20R-104.
A resolution of support of the Fixed Route 8 expansion project and declaring an emergency.
You want that meeting, huh?
All I can say is Councilman Meyer and I myself attended the meeting over at Lake Tran, and this is something been worked on for 8 years, and at least one trip to Columbus with Lake Tran individuals to try and get this established, and finally it's going to happen, not only for the Minter Headlands, but also enhance the down Tyler Boulevard for the economic development. Much appreciated.
Council, what is your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Oh, yeah, we don't have to suspend this, do we?
Yeah, you do.
We do.
Yes.
Move to suspend.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes. Resolution number 20R-104 has been adopted. Second reading, we have none. Third reading, we have none. Manager's report, Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Very short report this evening. Just wanted to remind council that the Bell Metal reconstruction public meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 27th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. That is, again, at the Headlands Community Center. And just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of new businesses in town, both of which we've been eagerly anticipating. Mission Barbecue at 7787 Reynolds Road, and I know some of us in the room had a chance to visit there, both at their grand opening and ribbon cutting yesterday. Fantastic food, fantastic location. I'm sure they're going to do well. And At Home at 7980 Plaza Boulevard. I tell you, my family has already visited there and spent a few dollars, so
My wife too.
I'm sure they'll do well. And we thank them for their investment in the community and wish them great success moving forward. That's all.
Clerk.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Can we offer an update on the Diamond Center widening and the traffic light at Menards? Have we got any updates on that?
Mr. Swigger?
Okay, just starting with the traffic signal project, everything, all the underground work has been completed for the conduit and wiring and the foundation. So currently waiting on delivery of the traffic signal poles. As soon as they're in, they'll be installed, and which will be in the spring. It will be functional. The widening project, we're currently communicating with all of the utilities. We've had several meetings with the utility companies for conflicts with the roadway widening. So we have another one scheduled this week. So, but currently working through the design with the conflicts with the utility companies. That's where we're at, and anticipating that at this point we would probably have about 6 months before we could begin work after the utilities are relocated.
So you do anticipate some construction this year yet?
We are hoping to, and like I said, at this point, the delay is a little longer than we expected, but it would definitely take place later in the year.
Thank you.
Clerk's correspondence. Julie?
Nothing to report.
Commission committee reports. There are none for this evening. Old business. Hearing none. New business. Hearing none. Persons before council. Having none. Is there
Move to adjourn.
Second. Almost a record.